JonathanKing9. Well, we're in 1964 and I've just returned from my trip around the world, and after taking a few months of the summer off and going off to Europe and joining my mum over there and having a bit of a holiday, I went up to Cambridge. Now, the first thing I discovered at Cambridge, which was horrifying, was that my digs in my first year at Trinity College were actually not in college, but were in a place called Jesus Lane, which was loads of houses, all looked after by owners or landladies or whoever, who basically took in the undergraduates for a fee from the college and looked after us. Well, my landlady was a Miss Slack, and the frightening thing about Miss Slack was she was covered from head to foot in warts. I mean, I promise you, you will not believe it, but it really is true. From head to foot in warts. Of course, I didn't look in certain places, but I assume they were there as much as anywhere else. Anyway, Miss Slack was actually quite a sweet old lady, but it was extremely intimidating because when I say warts, I mean huge warts hanging on little strings all over her face and her hands and everywhere else. Quite apart from the worry about was I going to catch warts from her, it was also rather unhygienic, and the house itself wasn't that clean. But anyway, I moved into my room and I actually got myself a television and fixed up an aerial on the roof and managed to be reasonably happy there, and started my time at Cambridge and went to various lectures, loved it, but all the time I was still desperately trying to get into music. Now, just to fill you up with the music situation, I'd connected a couple of years earlier with a group from our local town of Cranley in Surrey. They were called the Bumbleys, and their lead singer was a guy called Terry Ward. And they and I had gone out on various gigs. I was technically their manager, but I managed to get to sing a few numbers and prance around on stage. I remember being a huge success at the Tunsgate Club in Guildford. I wonder if it's still there. But anyway, I was doing it all. I was writing some songs and bits and pieces. And they were the band that I essentially was a part of. And I wasn't really a lead singer of it, so I was trying to be a producer and a writer, and I wrote them a song called Gotta Tell, which I was sure was a hit. And I went up to London in the school holidays, and then, of course, when I was up at university, trying desperately to get somebody to pick it up and release it. And after numerous failed attempts, I finally had success. And it was with a lovely man called Dennis Berger, who was the A&R man at the time at Fontana Records in London. And I remember playing it to him, and he was sitting there with a top DJ of the time called Don Moss. And they listened to it, and he said, "I really like this. I think it's a hit. We'll put it out." So I had my first release, only written and produced by me, sung by Terry Ward and the Bumbleys. It is still available on eBay if you pay a lot of money for it. It didn't do a thing, but it started me off, and I got very busy trying to promote it. I blew out loads and loads of hens' eggs, chickens' eggs, and painted them because it was Easter. Gotta Tell, and I took them round all the various assorted music magazines and radio producers and everything, and although it got no results and nobody played it, I did at least get noticed by them. And the other thing that happened was I had approached Joe Meek, who I thought was a brilliant producer, probably the British equivalent of Phil Spector. And he, I think more impressed by my enthusiasm and my glasses that made me look a bit like Buddy Holly at the time, decided that he'd give me a shot and produce me as a singer with the Bumbleys backing me. So I wrote another couple of songs called All You Gotta Do Is Love Me Baby. I was obviously big on gotta in those days. Thank heavens I got talked out of it. And we went up to Joe Meek's strange little studio in the Holloway Road, and we recorded there, and that was an unbelievable experience. Joe Meek had completely his homemade stuff, rather like the equipment you can see behind me now, but this is the new high-tech stuff. In those days, it was extremely primitive. To get a great bass drum sound, he used to stand in his bath, and on the wooden floorboards outside, he placed one of those old BBC microphones wrapped in foam, and he stamped on the floor throughout the song to give a decent bass drum sound. The result of this, of course, was huge smashes like Tornadoes and Telstar, and Have I the Right by the Honeycombs, and loads of hits with Johnny Layton and Heinz and all the others, Mike Berry. And I actually think he was, I still to this day think he was a genius and a brilliant producer. He was, of course, brought to an untimely end by his own hand. He was gay and he was haunted by all sorts of horrors. Never made any approach to me, by the way, which probably said I was an extremely ugly teenager, but also I think he was a very decent, nice man. And he ended up shooting his landlady in this strange place in Holloway Road, turning the gun around and shooting himself. A very untimely death for a hugely talented man. Anyway, the tracks I made with Joe, All You Gotta Do, never came out, but it was my first experience of recording. Meanwhile, I was still attending Cambridge. I was going to university lectures, which were very beneficial. I was studying English literature, which I absolutely loved. I was mixing with my friends, Keith Glennie, Mike Bizarka, Frank and Roger. These were all my friends up there. But I was still incredibly frustrated. I thought I was going to be a pop star, or at least a pop producer, and I seemed to be getting nowhere near it. Further tales and adventures of my life in Cambridge University in Jonathan King 10.